The transfer portal has been one of the major innovations in all of sports. It's become a great tool for teams to build rosters, and it's become a pathway for players to chase their dreams of the NBA. And we're going to be talking about some of our favorite transfer portal fits here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show. I'm Stephen Gillaspie with my co-host Jam Hines. Jam, how we feeling, brother?
Fantastic, ready to get into some portal talk of these transfers that hit the portal and seem to be in great situations.
All right, let's rock. We are live here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel. We are also on your podcast player of choice. I'm Stephen Gillaspie with my co-host Jam Hines. We're the Draft Sickos, and we have such a fun show lined up for you all today where we're going to be talking about some of our favorite transfer portal fits here on the show. But before we dive in, Jam, let's hit the folks with some housekeeping.
Yeah, always got to take care of that stuff
Yes,
nice and
sir.
early, keep things tidy. At NoCeilingsNBA.com, we have Maxwell's More Stones on turn, and Metcalf did Mika Marian's move to Partisan, which kind of were some rumblings in the background, but kind of really shocked some folks. So he's going to be a name to watch out for. Also, Nathan has the Atlantic Division preview of the young players, and Steven has his hoop exchange from the Fall Festival, which you did a great job. I really enjoyed your coverage of that kind of things you are putting out publicly about it behind the scenes from that great event. And Locked on NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings. Rucker and Metcalf had a pod on Marion and the NBL early reaction, so we get that kicked off. Nathan and Maxwell discuss how to scout centers in the 2026 class, and Albert and Corey had pod scouts on Darius Acuff and Sean Abayev. I know Steven and I are very high on Abayev, so I'm very excited to see how he plays out this year. And finally, the No Ceilings NBA YouTube and podcast feed, Rucker and Metcalf had their mid-major preview. So we have a lot of stuff out right now, and I was just talking to Steve before we got on air, just like, man, it feels like we're already doing so much, a lot's happening right now, and we haven't even really kicked things into full gear yet.
Yeah, and we're going to drop things into full gear here in the coming weeks. We're going to keep everything kind of hush hush for a little bit just because we have things in order, but I'll share a little bit with the people here, Jam. We're all family. We all turned in some information for a major project, of course, that we're going to be using to kick off the draft cycle here. I'll leave that for the very intelligent audience to kind of put together. But Jam, today, we're talking about our favorite transfer portal fits. This is going to be part one of a two-part series. And guys, listen, we know that the names that we're dropping today aren't all necessarily the biggest names of all the transfers, but we're wanting to cover a lot of ground before the season kicks off. We want to give you more scouts, more evaluations on more names. And to that point, Jam, we've already hit 38 prospects, just me and you
Wow.
here on Draft Sickos. Yeah,
Not
and
too bad.
today, not too bad, man. I think we're doing all right. Today will take us to 44. And when we finish up these two parts, we will have given the people 50 evaluations to by that point leading up into the draft. So we almost got a full mock draft, a full big board evaluation of everybody here. And this is just light work, man. We're just keep pushing this stuff out. But Jam, let's go ahead and hit the people with our first prospect here. He is a transfer to the University of Kentucky, come from Tulane. He's a wing, sophomore, 6'8", 205, will be 20 years old in his first NBA season if he comes out after this year. We're talking about Kam Williams. So, Jam, on Kam, what are your overall thoughts on him? Are you pretty high on him, a little lukewarm, kind of wait and see? Where are you at with our guy here?
I am pretty high on Kam. I got a chance to see him early in the cycle in person when Tulane came to play George Mason. And he, in person, just like on film, he looks every bit the part of an NBA wing. He moves like it. The dimensions are there. The size at 6'8". He's now listed at 205 pounds on the
Mm-hmm.
site for Kentucky. And this is what about, I think, roughly 25 pounds on some quick math here. He was at 180 pounds at Tulane. So obviously, we know those things. Teams can kind of skew one way with height and weight and kind of manipulate some things. But just by looking at him and the type of frame that he has, it's a wiry frame but fairly broad shoulders. He can put on some mature muscle and some have seen some of the early pictures and videos of Cam. This does seem believable that he did make a sizable jump with the strength. Maybe not 25 pounds, but we'll actually see what that case is. But say that to say that is great for his long-term projection of continuing to add that needed mature muscle to his frame when he gets to the NBA level. But really, when you look at someone like him, for me, he has the makings of a lottery pick because of that NBA positional size, the shooting, and the defense. And that all comes in a translatable role at the floor. He's a 3-and-D type of guy. Last year, he shot 41.2% on 4.6 3-point attempts per game, including 42.4% on catch and shoot threes. So he has that off-ball threat. I do like some of the shooting versatility that he's shown. I know you differ just a little bit, and I'll let you get into that when we get there, but I did like the hints of the movement shooting, to be able to relocate, to come off of pin downs, in addition to the standstill shooting and spacing that he provides. And then off of that, with this spot up role, which is so low usage when he's able to space the floor, I think he's a very good cutter. He's very active with his athleticism once he gets downhill. And defensively, really, with him, it's just that ranginess. He's long. He's able to play passing lane. So I think even if he doesn't become a plus defender, I do think in a sense, with his frame, kind of the switchable frame that he has and ability that he has, and his ability to be able to be disruptive in passing lanes and block some shots on the ball and just be able to bring that defensive playmaking and event creation. I think all in all, like, this is a guy who potentially could have a very high floor, but the ceiling is to be determined.
Yeah, ceiling is the roof in the infamous words of Michael Jordan, right? So just to kind of put some numbers to the evaluation that you just gave, Jam. Last year, Cam averaged over 9 points, 4.5 boards, over 1 assist, over 1 block, almost 1.5 steals per game on 49, 41, 76 shooting splits. So very good year playing at a mid-major program, kind of doing a lot of everything, as is the case with most of those types of players, playing at a university like Tulane, right? Cam is an interesting guy. Jam, you touched on a lot of the reasons why a lot of people can be pretty bullish about him, and I loved how you mentioned that he could potentially be a lottery level prospect. I could see that happening, and you touched on the shooting, and you kind of foreshadowed a little bit at a conversation that you and I had. I like Cam as a spot up shooter. I really, really do. But something that I kind of noticed, Jam, was that I'm not so sure about the movement shooting. Like, if it's not anything to where he's already kind of squared up at the basket. In my film dive, I saw significantly more misses than makes when it was anything other than, catch and shoot, maybe a curl to the basket upon the catch, but anything that requires like some movement shooting, kind of shooting off platform, as we've talked about throughout the year. I noticed that Cam didn't really connect on a lot of those types of shots. Now, that might not necessarily be his role in the NBA level. This could just be like the most, unimportant aspect of scouting Cam Williams in the world. But I found it interesting that we were talking about Cam as as a lights out shooter, and movement shooting, shooting off platform, kind of contorting your body in such a way to where your upper body can be square at the basket, but is your lower body going to be set and feet pointing at the rim? That's that sort of a thing. I don't know if Cam is going to be like that. I hate to put anybody in this spotlight, but that Kyle Korver, JJ Redick like movement shooter, Klay Thompson level movement shooter, that again, that might not necessarily be asked of him, but it
Hmm.
is, in my opinion, it's something worth pointing out. Jam, is that something that you saw? Is that something kind of worth monitoring in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth monitoring, especially for any shooter. You always look at that type of versatility, just how many different ways can we utilize you as a shooter with your production as a shooter, your gravity as a shooter. I did like, although the production may not have been quite to the level that we will want off of movement, I did kind of like the process of it, if you will.
Mm.
I felt he came around screens hard. He read them pretty well. I thought in general he did a good job of getting his feet square, staying balanced when he's coming around screens, even when he gets to the occasional step back that he liked to show. So I did like some of the foundational and process work that he is showing. I didn't see anything that was greatly different about like the form with him like struggling or look like uncomfortable for him to shoot off moving and these type of things. If that was the case, then I would be a little bit more worried. But for me, I think it's just about like it didn't fall, but like everything else looks good. Let's just keep getting them up.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the reasons that he probably missed that is because his form is kind of like a catapult over his strong side shoulder,
Hmm.
his shooting
Hmm.
arm. It is kind of kilted a little bit to that right side. So I would imagine that if that's your natural shooting motion, then it's going to be hard to get that off of movement a whole heck of a lot. But again, young player, going to be playing with Mark Pope in that system where there's a lot of movement, very NBA friendly type of a scheme. And
Yeah.
just quickly, another thing to mention here, you talked about the weight gain allegedly that he underwent, gaining
Allegedly.
around, that 25 pounds. It's not all that different from what we saw with Jaden Quaintance coming from Arizona State, allegedly around 40 pounds, so
Hmm.
there's a lot of muscle building going on in Kentucky, in that bluegrass state there. But Jam, there's more to his game, in my opinion, than simply just being a shooter. Some things that I saw
Yep.
is that there's a little bit of driving kick to his game. Got the shot off quick, a bit of a step back. Again, I think that you can hit that step back if you're still facing the basket. You're not necessarily kind of like left to right traveling this more north to south. You're still kind of square. So I think that he can kind of hit that. But you mentioned the cutting. That was an aspect of his game that I was just like pleasantly surprised by, just going
Hmm.
back and revisiting the film. This the timeliness of it, where it seemed like he's just kind of doing like a shallow cut or something like that, just to kind of create motion along the perimeter for the ball handler, free something up with the defense, and then next thing you know, he's just making a beeline at the basket where he
Yes.
showed some really good touch around the basket as well, some good mid-range craft, not just simple layups. I would say that he's not necessarily demanding physicality to get a shot off, but he wasn't necessarily bothered by it either because he's got these lanky arms, which is probably why he was able to gain so much weight. He had the frame to put a little bit of muscle on there, but I love
Hmm.
just the craft that he was able to kind of finish around the basket, the timeliness of his cuts, how he was deceptive with his movements to set up the defense to kind of use their momentum against him like a judo fighter, right? And
Yeah.
next thing you know, he's meeting you at the rim and laying one up and getting back on defense. What did you think about the non-shooting aspect of Cam's offense?
Yeah, it was fantastic. When he's primarily going to play an off-ball role in the NBA, we'll talk a little bit more potentially about him on the ball, especially at Kentucky.
Yeah.
But him playing off the ball, you have the shooting, and then what you mentioned the cutting, just how timely he is and deceptive. It was so many times where he's kind of just take a couple steps. He kind of hits him with a little hezzy, and then he's gone.
Yep.
He takes off, or he'll come up, which I always like. He puts up the fist like he's going to set a screen, and then he goes. So I like kind of the deception that he's using with those, and then the athleticism that he has at the rim. And then, with that, just he brings the connective passing, whether he's going to come out and attack closeouts because of the shooting, or he's already on the move, kind of catching stampede and doing those type of things. I'm not really seeing anything that where it's like, hey, he can be a primary type of playmaker for you. We'll see where things go this year, especially if he can be a secondary guy that can do something on the second side of the floor. But I do like the connective passing. Like he'll swing it, he'll skip it, he'll try to make the right read and make that 0.5 second decision. So I do like those things about him off the ball as well.
I think that that's an astute, kind of analysis of that. You mentioned the on-ball stuff, and now playing at Kentucky as a wing with Tulane, he was able to do a little bit of kind of like secondary, tertiary type stuff. I am kind
Yeah.
of concerned that we won't necessarily get to see as much on ball, with Jalen Lowe coming in. They brought in Jasper Johnson. They have Otega
Hmm.
Owe there, who is probably his last ditch effort to try to make an NBA roster. Probably wants to have the ball in his hand a little bit more. Maybe a little bit of Jaden Quaintance facilitating out of
Exactly.
the five.
Exactly.
There's a lot of people who have flashes of a passing feel and probably want to experiment a little bit more. I think that Cam probably is not going to get as many looks as a facilitator. So what I'm wanting to see, Jam, is how does he look as a connective player? And I feel like what we saw at Tulane, that's going to translate pretty well. I will say that I probably don't want him cooking off of a live dribble very much, but if he can make these kind of 0.5 decisions where he's a stationary guy with a quick entry pass, whether that's an over the top of a defense, whether that's a slick
Mhm.
bounce pass, whether he's keeping the ball swinging, or maybe, a pump fake, drive, draw in the defense and kick out to that same strong side corner. I think there's a number of different ways that he can be impactful as a facilitator, as a connective guy, but as a primary on-ball facilitator, I don't know if we're necessarily going to get to see a whole lot of that, Jam.
Yeah, I echo the same sentiments. The reps just probably won't be there for him this year. Hopefully, he still can have some moments where he is experimenting, be able to play pick and roll, get some things in the ISO, and be able to play in some space and see what he can do off the bounce. But yeah, just everything that you said, it's going to translate what he's done from Tulane to Kentucky, and he's going to play a very similar role in the NBA. And for me, us as evaluators, I know for me, that makes the projection, the name of the game, so much easier. I've seen you do this at Tulane, and at a small level school. I'm going to see you do this at a higher level at Kentucky, and you're going to go transfer into a low usage role with the NBA size, the measurables, the coveted shooting, and the defensive playmaking. I really do like the floor that he does provide.
Likewise, my friend. So let's talk about that defense. You just briefly touched on it. Are you in on the defense? Do you think that's a strong point of the game, or do you just think that he kind of does enough to get by with his offense being the primary, strength of his game?
I do think that the defense is not just a passenger. It may not be the driving force of what
Mm.
the game is, but just with the physical tools, as I mentioned before, I don't really see a plus type of defender like on the ball. It's like, hey, I need you to go defend Tatum tonight, or I need you to go give Giannis some looks, or like I don't see him as like a wing type of defender. But I do like the tools. Maybe continue to get better at that. But the activity, the length that he has, the quick hands, he has good timing to block shots on the ball as well too. So I do like a lot of those things. We'll see what the switchability looks like. I want to see what he's like in space against point guards, what that looks like. I think that can enter the point of attack. Those are two huge areas that I think defensively can really raise his stock. But when you have someone with that NBA positional size, the activity, the defensive playmaking, I'll take that all day, even if kind of the shutdown aspects or what you may want ideally from a wing defender quite isn't there right now.
I would agree with that, and I think that Cam picked a really good school, in my opinion, to kind of accentuate his strengths and almost kind of put a safety blanket on some of the things that you might not necessarily be enthused about. And his defense to me wasn't terrible at all at Tulane. As a
Yeah.
matter of fact, I thought that I came away more impressed. Shout out to Ron Rosilla. I was actually more impressed with Kam Williams, defense. I thought that he held up well defensively, but if you consider who is on this Kentucky roster, Otega Owe is probably going to get the primary guy. Jaden Quaintance is going to clean up a lot on the back end, where Quaintance might be the best defender in this entire class. That puts Cam in the ability to take on, some of the lesser of the offensive talents that he's going to be facing on a nightly basis with the SEC. Where I am glad that he allegedly gained some weight, because I felt like he got screened off a little bit too easily and bumped off his line a little too easy at Tulane because of his weight. But if he got stronger, I feel more confident that he'll maintain that line. I thought that he did a good job of utilizing his length to contest and bother shots, solid closeout technique. I thought that, he has quick reflexes. I wish he would have used those a little bit more, where he did play
Yeah.
more of a conservative role with Tulane, where he's kind of the low man in a lot of zone defenses. We see this a lot, right, with these kind of like mid-major schools, and you're 6'8", like, hey, bud, you're going to have to give us
We need you
some.
to do this. Yeah.
Yep, we're going to need you to be in the bottom corner on a 2-3 zone, right? So you're going to have to cover a lot of ground, which I think has some utility, because if you have good ground coverage, then that's going to help you in your rotations, whether there's a skip pass and you're going from, help status to all of a sudden you're on the ball. I think that bodes well for him translating up a level a little bit. I thought that he did a good job of sliding laterally. And
Hmm.
again, the smart and quick hands could be beneficial for him. I just felt that he was a little bit too conservative. Hopefully with Kentucky this year, though, Jam, we see him up that level of intensity, because he's not going to necessarily have to be relied upon as much on the offensive end with this team.
Yeah, no doubt. Where do you see him defending in the NBA? Is it just twos and threes? Any chance at the four, or how much at the four, or different types of fours depending on the matchup?
I think it's going to be dependent upon the matchup. I like him on primarily twos, because I don't know what the strength looks like right now in the NBA.
Yeah.
If you're going to be one of those three defenders, those are typically some of the more physically imposing players along the perimeter that you're going to have to go up against. But again, this is a young dude, sophomore coming in this year, 20 years old come his draft season, if he gets drafted this upcoming season. So there's a lot of time for him to put
Yeah.
on, that grown man strength as he gets older, to where maybe he will become a defender of fours, which wasn't necessarily in the cards when Klay Thompson was coming out, right, of his rookie year. But eventually you get a little bit older, you get a little bit stronger, you have a greater understanding of how defense in the NBA works. You can't really rule it out, but I'm looking at him being like maybe a 1.5 position defender, like right out of the gates if
Hmm.
he comes out this year. I just need to see how the strength looks. How are you feeling about like that positional versatility that he might give on that end?
Yeah, I'm definitely twos and threes, and more so kind of stretch fours, ones that aren't going to be so physical with them. But yeah, I do like the frame at 6'8", the long arms. It's definitely plus length, and the continued strength that he's adding. I think all that's going to be incredibly crucial for him to be able to defend twos and threes, handle bumps, absorb bumps, and hold his lines and those type of things. So I think he's on his way to be able to get the requisite weight and strength that he needs to be a solid defender.
I can't help but agree, my man. So we're looking at a guy who we both look at offensively. Clearly a shoot first guy, right? He's going to be relied upon to be a floor spacer, like some of the passing. Would love to see that role increase a little bit. Probably not going to happen at Kentucky. And a guy who we think could be a contributor on the defensive end without being a detriment. So all in all, depending on how well he looks as a shooter, I mean, Jam, you touched on it, potential lottery guy. What range do you have him in right now on your board?
I have him right around in that lottery range. I don't remember the exact number, but I do have him with the with a lottery grade early in the process.
I have him in the second round, and that's just
Hmm.
like I have a lot of dudes that I really like, and I have a glut of prospects that I'm like, you could be really good, or you could be not so much. You could be a returner, and I kind of have him in that range. But I'm hoping to be proven wrong, because at that size, with the strap that he already has, if he can show that at Kentucky, only a matter of time before he starts shooting up my board, Jam. But we'll take this opportunity to transition to Jam Listen on our YouTube channel over at No Ceilings, which, by the way, if you're watching, thank you so much for hanging out. We already have people in the chat, Resball TV. Resball does a good job. Like, he hosts his own basketball
Great
podcast,
job.
does a
Yeah,
great
shout
job.
out.
I highly recommend it if you don't listen to it. But Resball says Cam is a man, great shooter. I can't help but agree. But if you're listening to us on a Sunday evening, thank you. If you're listening on Monday on your podcast, really appreciate it. Consider coming hanging out with us on Sunday. But Jam, we're going to transition now to Ian Jackson, who I put up a poll on our YouTube, like, which player of the four are you most excited about? Ian Jackson won the poll, Jam. A lot of
Yeah,
people
Captain
looking
Jack. Yeah.
Captain Jack. A lot of people are looking forward to this guy who's now listed, Jam, at 6'5" on St. John's website, 195 pounds, will be a sophomore, 21 years old, should he come out after this season. This past season, Jam, he averaged 12 points per game, almost 3 boards, under 1 assist, 0.2 blocks, 0.6 steals, with shooting splits of 46, 40, and 72. Jam, why should we be excited about Captain Jack this year with the Johnnies?
Well, who doesn't love a good home town kid? Well, he's from the Bronx, but home city kid going back home for that story. Kind of all the buzz for him before he committed to UNC that he was going to go to St. John, stay home, play for Rick Pitino, former 5-star recruit, McDonald's All-American. And he ends up there. It wasn't direct way, but he does get there after going to UNC. Kind of some ups and downs there, although he did end up finishing second and scoring there at 11.9 points per game, right behind RJ Davis, who clearly led the way for them last year. But besides being second leading scorer, he had 8 20-point games. He had a really fun stretch of games. I believe it was from like late January to about early February, mid-February, something like that. We was rattling off consecutive 20 points per game points in those games. A lot of those games, he really showed us his ability to score off the bounce, the pull-up scoring, the shot making ability. He's not the most bursty off the bounce, I would say. Like, he does have a creative handle and a quick initial first step, and love to get to that step back. But he really relies upon and settles for a lot of tough shots. He is that quote unquote stereotypical tough shot maker and tough shot maker. That's just kind of what his game is. And a little bit surprisingly to me, like, he nearly shot 40% from three, 39.5% from three on 4.2 3-point attempts per game. So even with that, he shot the three at a high clip, even off the ball and catch and shoot threes, 45.3% on 64 attempts as well. So I was very pleasantly surprised about that. But here comes the but. Although I
Big one
love the
too.
scoring at 6'4", 6'5", he has to do more than that. The playmaking has to take a step forward in this day and age. Like, he's 6'4", 6'5", primarily scorer. Like, you're coming off the bench. Your role is going to be give me some bench punch unless you can be a guy that can make plays for me on the ball. And I think that's a great opportunity for him. We talk about fits here. One reason I like the fit for him at St. John's going back home is he gets a chance to grow in two key areas for him, two swing areas for him. And that as a playmaker, where Rick Pitino's already said, we have a point guard. So he's going to get a chance to fulfill that role, be able to grow there. And then also on the defensive end, there are tools there, but getting that consistency, getting that buy-in for a defensive coach like Rick Pitino. So, like, all in all, I do like the fit there. Long-term, I'm not quite too sure about the NBA prospects unless that he can make a jump in his defensive ability and also the playmaking. Did you see things similar with him? Or am I too hard on him?
I think you're fair. I'll put it that way. And I'll be honest, like, nothing against our fantastic audience. I was surprised of all the names that we had listed. We listed 4 of the 6 that we're going to be talking about. Ian Jackson not only won the poll, but like won it running away, Jam. I believe last I looked, it was like 60% of the votes went to Ian Jackson. So, and we had a bunch of people vote on it. I was surprised that he took it by a landslide because
New York media
at its finest, at its finest. I think Corey probably had something to do with it. It's up around his neck of the woods. Listen, when I talk about scouting guards at all, Jam, I don't know if you and I have had this conversation yet. I think that guards are probably the hardest position to scout, like especially if they're point guards, because I think it's a pretty thin line when you talk about what's the difference between an NBA point guard and a really good college point guard. I think that line is almost like transparent, like on paper thin, like the paper exists, but you can see through it type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of it comes down to situation, opportunity, the type of team that you go to. I don't know if Ian Jackson is the type of guard that NBA teams are coveting. You know what I mean? Like, look at what
Yeah.
Cam Johnson is going through in in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? Where he can score like one of the best scorers in the NBA straight up, and he contract disputes with the Nets because they just reloaded. They drafted like 5 people who can kind of do
Yeah.
what he
Yeah.
can do, like at least all together. So with Ian, like you said, I was shocked to see that he was at 40% because he did that on a pretty difficult shot diet. I think, he is a dynamic scorer. I think that he has crazy handle. I think that he is pretty quick twitchy. I think you did a good job of explaining it when you mentioned that he has a very good first step. I think that once he gets past you, it's going to be really hard for anyone to recover onto him. But I do think that he is a little bit too perimeter oriented. I thought when he went inside the paint, he was very easily to block, could be a little bit contact averse. And I think that played a part in him being blocked so much because he wouldn't go into a defender. He kind of wanted to finesse his way around, lean
Yeah.
around, like try to use his length. And when you kind of flatten out like that, the release point of the ball is not going to be very high. And because of that, you end up getting blocked or tipped or whatever the case may be. I thought he had nice step throughs and rip through moves to get to the paint. And whenever he got his floater off, it looked really nice. But I just thought that he wanted to take a lot of tough shots. I thought that even the shots that he did take, like his 3-pointer has a dip in it, which I think is indicative of the lack of strength that we saw from him last year. If he really is up to close to 200 pounds, I think that that's great, especially if he grew an inch from his last year's listing when he was with UNC. If he got a little bit stronger, got a little bit taller, I kind of like that. But the overall offensive scoring package, I don't think is the concern for NBA teams, Jam. I think it's the fact that
Exactly.
he's going to be a lead guard, and he averaged less than 1 assist per game at UNC last season, Jam. And when I looked at his passes, I thought he could be a little bit loose. I thought he could be a little bit lax because of the strength deficit. I felt like the ball could be easily bullied away from him. Lost the ball in the trees a lot. Was a player who can make these straight line passes, like these scheme passes within the flow of a play. But whenever it comes down to I'm going to facilitate and create for others, I found him to be severely lacking last year. So hopefully with St. John's, he can get a little bit better in that regard.
Yeah, and I think you did an excellent job of breaking that down and then also mentioning a guy like Cam Thomas who's in that role who is like a 6'3", 6'4" scorer, a guy that typically wants to be your lead guard, but that playmaking aspect and the overall kind of decision making and floor game is not quite there for what you will want as a starting level caliber lead guard. But I don't think he is the type of scorer that can that that young man is an absolute bucket, like a natural born scorer, and he's shown that. I don't think Ian is quite that. Another name that kind of in that kind of spectrum of these type of guards that popped in my mind too, as you were talking about it, was Caleb Love. I do like
Mm.
Ian Jackson more than Caleb Love, and especially I think Ian's more efficient. And Caleb's thing was just like he had to be more efficient for that style anyway. But then the playmaking has to take a step. The defense has to take a step. It just can't be you scoring at that size and just kind of like the opportunity cost to do that for you just really didn't make sense for teams. So he's for Ian Jackson, kind of rounding it back to him. He's going to have to take a step as a playmaker, whether it's going to be on the offensive side with the ball in his hands or defensive playmaker. Is he going to get into guys on the defensive end? He's going to defend at the point of attack. Is he going to buy into completely, Rick Pitino's defensive mentality? Because if he does, he certainly can take a leap forward and solidifying himself as a draftable player.
I think that the defense for one, I was pleasantly surprised by the defense from
Mm-hmm.
like going back and look at it versus what I just went off of the recall that I had of his game. I came away more surprised with his defense. I thought that he was serviceable there. And I think that if he at his size, if he does get a little bit stronger and he is a little bit more of an effort guy on the defensive end and can pass a little bit, you really can start seeing like these Cole Anthony, the Kobe Whites, the Peyton Pritchard types of outcome with a guy like Ian Jackson as opposed to Cam Thomas. But there's still going to be a place for a guy who can get you buckets, a guy who can still space the floor, who can
Always.
get
Yeah.
who can get 3-pointers on high volume. It's probably going to be relegated to a bench role. I don't know if that's necessarily worth like first round capital. As a matter of fact, I don't even know like right now, Jam, if I would take him in the second round, to be completely honest with you, because I'm working on a piece that should be coming out in about a week and a half. But I think for this class, the guards are going to have a major say in the kind of the outcome of the draft class, because if you look at the way that teams are currently outfitted at guards, it's not necessarily the strongest point, but I do think the guard quality and quantity in this class is so good that it's going to make for interesting like drafting for BPA versus fit, because I think if you look at BPA, again, very early, a lot of these dudes haven't even touched the court yet. But if you look at the BPA right now on a lot of people's boards, so many of them are these guards, like these types of guards. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes into the draft, who just tests the waters, or who in returns back to college, or who stays. And for Jackson, is he going to be comfortable being drafted 35th? As opposed to 28th? Is he even going to be comfortable being drafted 28th? Or does he want to come back for another year St. John's basketball and make a couple mil and run it back again? So I think that the conversation around guys like Ian Jackson are going to be so fascinating as this year kind of fleshes itself out.
Yeah, it really will be, and I do know it's very, very early. No games have been played this year with the college games, at least, him at St. John's. But I am leaning to him being there for another year too. Anything could happen, but I do believe the best course forward right now looks to be for him to spend one more year at St. John's.
Yeah, we got to see the playmaking come up. I am encouraged with what I saw on the defensive end, Jam. I think he could be a one, maybe two possession defender if he got stronger and if he does get effort on that end. But if you look at St. John's, I mean, he's got Sanan coming in, who kind of similar, had a lot of expectations around him at Arizona State. A little underwhelming, both with him and the program that he attended. Now trying to kind of rekindle that draft stock, that hype that he had coming into his freshman year. It's going to be interesting to see how those two play alongside each other, both trying to accomplish this same goal. But Jam, we're going to take this break real quick, and we'll be back to talk about, Jam, the number 3 spot on our outlines are typically guys that I'm like kind of low key sneaky in on. We'll be talking about one of my favorite dudes within this lineup when we come back after this break. All right, we're back here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show. Jam and I, we are talking about our favorite, the top transfer prospects, part 1 of a 2-part series. Jam, we've talked about Kam Williams. We talked about Ian Jackson, Captain Jack. Now we're going to be talking about former Virginia guy who I know is near and dear,
Yeah.
now transferred to USC, a kind of combo forward big man sophomore, listed at 6'10", 232 pounds is the last listing that I saw. Will be 21 should he come out after his sophomore season. Talking about Jacob, it's Cofie, right? Or is it Coffee? Or is it Cofie?
I've heard Cofie. I haven't heard too much coffee, but it could be.
Okay, Cofie like Kofi
I'll have to
Kingston. All right.
confirm that. Yeah, so we get that right for you, Cofie, Jacob.
There we go. All right, but Jacob last year with Virginia averaged 7.2 points per game, over 4.5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, almost 1 block, shot 50, 24, 75. Jam, I am very interested to see how Jacob develops this year. I know Coach Musselman, formerly of the Arkansas Razorbacks, now coaching the USC Trojans. I know that Muss hasn't done the best job in USC as of late. That for whatever reason, we were talking about this in our chat, like the West Coast hoops have not been where it's at as of late. USC being no exception. Jam, what are your thoughts on Jacob? What did you see from him last year? What are you kind of expecting of him this year as a sophomore?
Yeah, and as you mentioned already, like, honestly, selfishly, I'm sad that I won't be able to see him in person like I was able to do a lot at UVA last season. And he's someone that really started to make noise in the draft community early and just standing out with his combination of size at 6'10", the movement skills, the evolving ball skills, the shot making hints, and then also the defensive playmaking that he was showing. So he gets a chance to go back home, transfers to the West Coast, and over at USC, where it looks like he will be a starter. It remains to be seen whether he's more of a 4 or a 5 there. And I think that's kind of things where I'm struggling with him at the next level in general. But we'll see how it plays out in the college level first. But there is a lot to like about him and the tools that he has as a potential 4 or 5 man. I like some of the stuff that he can do in DHO with some
Mm,
the shiftiness and be able to find guys back door. I do think that his best role is probably just going to be as a play finisher, but I'm also a little bit weary of that because of the athleticism. Like he's a good athlete, but when you talk about going to like the vertical explosiveness and being above the rim finisher, that's not quite where his game is. He's not going to be that consistent lob threat. So if his primary mode of operation on the NBA level is going to be as a play finisher, I'm a little bit concerned about that. So I want to continue to see more from him, running the DHOs, being able to, like he showed at UVA, play out of the high and low post, mid post, face up to be able to do some things, shoot over guys. And although the shooting does look pretty projectable, like I like the form for the most part, the arc that he gets, some of the touch indicators on the middies, but like he still is someone that shot was a well below 30% from three. So it's like
yeah, 24%. Yeah.
well below and not a lot of attempts either. So it's, that's something that does, I think, will be a swing skill for me because I'm just not quite sure how high level the rest of the tools are in that play finishing role. And then defensively, he's not going to be an anchor for you. And if that's someone that's going to play the 5, that's going to be tough and kind of moves him more towards the bench, which is fine. He can be incredibly productive and have a long, successful career that way. But if he's going to be a big at the 5, that just kind of automatically pushes him there. But quick hands defensively, I do like some of the strength there, the mobility. But once again, he's not going to be a rim protector with that lack of explosiveness there. And then just in general, not being an anchor, that kind of bothers me a bit about his long-term profile.
It's interesting the point in time in the NBA that Jacob could be entering the league because if it was 2 seasons ago and we were kinda questioning, like, is he a 4? Is he a 5? Is
Hmm.
he gonna be able to do these things? Probably not a lot of, suitors for a guy like Jacob, but now with, the double big lineup, or as, Ron Russillo and I like to say, power forward and center, traditional, are coming back into vogue. I'm a little bit more optimistic, and now I will say, Jam, I'm with you that touch indicators were decent, but if there's one thing that I'm encouraged by, it's a young big who's willing to come in and take threes and attempt to. He didn't set the world on fire like you said with his volume, but the fact that he doesn't look uncomfortable taking jumpers, I think is a good sign, like right out of the gate. I like that he wants to get to that mid-range pull up a little bit. And even though he's one of these bigs who might profile to be an outside shooter, I do think that it's awesome that he didn't just make that the default for him because, yeah,
Yeah.
he would wanna face up, but he would either pull up out of a face up or he'd hit his drive, spin, and just kinda, like, float like flicking layup out of the spin move, so I love that he has some kind of duality to his,
Hmm.
triple threat lineup that he would look to go into. I thought that, he drew fouls, put good pressure on the rim. I think that he's pretty shifty at his size. I don't think that a lot of big men in college are going to be used to a big man that can move laterally on offense the way that he can, especially with the ball in his hand. I think that that gives him a lot of utility. I think that he understands floor spacing well. He's a guy who I think that you're gonna have to. at least try to defend if he steps out on the perimeter as a big man, which does give you some interesting looks if you're USC as well.
Yeah.
I do think that all of that is good, but just like we were talking about with Senac, I think that how good is he gonna be at the big man stuff? That's gonna be the big question, you know? Even though he was listed at 232 pounds, which I think is good for his size, he didn't particularly play strong or physically imposing. I found it interesting that USC does not have a weight listed for him on their team's website, so you kinda had to rely on last year's numbers in terms of weight listing. I don't know if that's gonna be good, and even in his practice pictures of him at USC, he's still wearing a T-shirt, so maybe he's not, packing as much weight as what we might see from Jaden Quaintance this season, but I'm worried about the screen setting effectiveness and his impact on that. Is he gonna be able to rebound effectively on both ends of the floor consistently? And Jam, I'll ask you this question. I think the motor is good. I just don't know if it's always on fire. I don't He's not a guy who I think is lazy for a big man by any means, but I
Yeah.
don't know if he's like running with his hair on fire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and I do like the rebounding and kind of the motor he can show there, especially in the offensive glass too. It does have to be much more consistent, especially if he's gonna be in a role in the NBA where he's not gonna be a primary or secondary type of guy, at least at this stage, that's what it's projected out to be. So it's gonna be imperative for him to do those big man things, those little things at a consistently high level on a night in and night out basis. And I think that's something that we should see at USC. And I think just the potential matchups going to be very interesting to see who he plays next to and kind of what the responsibilities are. Because you have Ezra Sarr who transferred. He's like a 4 or 5. He was
Love
at
Ezra.
yeah, so a strong guy. Usually plays the 4 and the 5, and then you have another guy there. I'm not sure how much he's going to play, but Gabe's at Dines or Deans. I think it's Dines, but he
Don't make
came
me
from
lie to you, brother. I have to look.
he's a 7'5" big man from Youngstown State who led the nations in blocks, and he was all defensive team in the Horizon League. So he's someone if Cofie plays the 4, he plays the 5. So I'm just curious to see what that kind of combination of the 4 or 5 looks like for him, and then what those responsibilities look like for him too.
I agree, man. And I think what's going to make those matchups interesting is that Jacob's actually like a fairly good passer too
He
for his
is
position. I think that
sneaky good.
yeah, very like it's going to be I think he's going to take people off guard like initially playing at USC. And the problem with him playing at USC is a lot of us, you know, East Coasters, you know, elitists, if
Sleep.
you will, we'll be long asleep by then, man. He's going to fall victim to the same stuff that my man Benedict Mathurin fell victim to whenever he was at Arizona. But I think that, you know, he has some good high-low feel. So whether he's playing the
Hmm.
4 or the 5, he's going to make good entry passes. I think that he looks good making those scheme plays. You mentioned the DHO look. I think because he can handle a little bit, that you have to really play him all ways out of the DHO. You have to respect the handoff, but you got to respect the rejecting of the handoff, make a dribble and make a decision that he's going to be able to bring to you. And I think that once he gets the ball in the paint, and if he has a size mismatch and is going to draw help, he's going to kick it to the open guy as well. So I think that that's going to be such an important aspect of his game to monitor. And we know that the NBA loves to have the offense run through their big man Jam, but they also expect them to play good defense. And I like the defense. I really do. I think if he gets stronger, that's going to make him all the more imposing because right now I look at him more as like a rim protector as opposed to a rim deterrent. I don't think that players are going to be necessarily afraid to go at him, but I do like the ground coverage. I do like how well he moves his feet. He's pretty light on his feet. And I think that he might not be the biggest plus wingspan guy. I don't know if you kind of saw that as well, Jam, but I think that even though he might only be like a +2, +3 wingspan guy, that's still a long wingspan that you're going to have to kind of shoot over, and he uses that to his advantage.
Yeah, he definitely does. I Is there an aspect about his game? let's say if the shooting does not project moving forward, like if maybe he just becomes a 30% three-point shooter, but regardless, it's just not enough to really warrant the type of respect that he needs to as a shooting type of big. Is there another aspect of his game, whether it's the defense, the play finishing, the passing, whatever it is, maybe a combination that you believe in that can kind of overcome the benefits of him shooting? Because for me, it's early, of course. I want to
Sure.
preface
Yeah.
by saying that, but I want to disqualify the shooting from him not being able to become an effective NBA player. But I'm I think the shooting has to be there for him because the play finishing, as far as the physical tools of being the explosive, tools up, ideal type of athlete, that's not really there. So that concerns me in a play finishing role, and especially if you don't have the above the rim finishing or a consistent crafty below the rim finishing game, or a short roll compensator. I'm just not seeing that. Maybe I'm just overlooking that, but is there an aspect that you believe in?
I think that the shooting is kind of the foundation of the draft stock,
Yeah,
Jam. I'm with you because look, I think that Isaiah Mobley at USC was a fine college player, but as we've seen, he's kind of struggled to make his way to be an impactful member of the NBA. And if his last name isn't Mobley, I don't know if he does get a shot in the NBA, to be perfectly honest. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with Jacob right now, is that the shot has to be there because, like I said, he's not like one of these physically imposing big men. You already mentioned that he's not an above the rim finisher consistently. I do think that he can be a lob threat. Even in my notes,
yeah,
like I thought that he was like a pretty decent lob threat, but he doesn't give you like a lot of vertical floor spacing consistently. And I do think that face up is a big aspect of his game. Even if he doesn't shoot from deep, I still think that a big man who can kind of take you off the elbow or out of that mid post, and you got to respect him, kind of going left, right, or forward. That
still
gives
valuable.
is still valuable. I think that he's a decent rebounder. I think that the draft stock is going to be contingent upon the shot and some added strength, which I think that both of those things are very realistic. That's why, out of the names that we're talking about,
Hmm.
he might he might be the name that I'm like following the hardest out of all of these because at his size, with the skill that he gives you, if he can get a little bit stronger and a little bit more consistent from deep, which again at his age I think is perfectly fine to just kind of expect him to get better as a shooter for
Yeah.
his position. I think that he has a real shot to make it in the NBA. But to answer your question, Jam, yeah, like a lot of it is going to be anchored on the 3-point shot being a real weapon.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to be watching closely how he does in the short roll, and that's kind of an area that I'm hoping that can be a compensator for him. He's comfortable in the mid range, as we talked about, can be able to make some quick decisions. What I'll be looking for with the field flashes that he's shown. And I think, he has good footwork. If you catch it there in the pocket, spin, make a play with that score. If it's a quick kick out, drop off, where the situation's going to be, maybe he gets a push shot to the arsenal there too. So I'll definitely be looking for that.
And again, I think that the defense is fine. I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think it's necessarily, you know, earth shattering or he's not a
Yeah.
world beater necessarily on that end, but I think that he's a very acceptable defender at a very young age. Which again, add weight, he could be even more of a problem on the low block as a defender. But I'm excited about him. Jam, let's transition now to a player that I know that you're excited about a lot. The BYU guard transfer sophomore, 6'1", 183 pounds, will be 20 years old come this next upcoming NBA season, should he get drafted. We're talking about the Baylor transfer, Robert Wright III. Last year, kind of sneakily scored almost 12 points per game, grabbed over 2 rebounds, over 4 assists, 1 steal. Don't ask him about blocks. Shot 41% from the floor, 35% from deep, and 80% from the free throw line. Jam, I just want to kind of turn this over to you, man. I know that you were kind of between a couple players. Ultimately, we just said, hey, why not more?
Hmm.
And one of these
More the
names was,
merrier.
yeah, more the merrier. We're draft sickos here. We got to live up to the name. What has you looking forward to watching Robert Wright III this year?
Yeah, he was one of the most exciting freshman guards last season. For me, he's someone that earned the respect of Scott Drew pretty quickly and the trust, and was in that starting lineup and really made a huge impact on that team with his ability to be able to set the table and also score and just really facilitate. And because of that, he became one of the most sought after guards and players in the transfer portal, period. With the NIL race for him was pretty crazy, and he lands at BYU. And what I like about that is it's another opportunity for him to continue to be in the spotlight. He's going to have a chance to run the show on the team that is poised to make and expecting to make a deep NCAA tournament run. And he's going to be next to the potential number one pick in the draft in Elyjah Freeman. And it kind of also is a return for him to continue to show what he has done best and be able to facilitate and play next to high level talent and make them better and kind of make just the whole engine go, which I think is a strength of his game. And we all by this point know he was a part of leading the way for that Mount Verde team with Cooper Flag that went undefeated and won Chipotle Nationals with Flag, Queen, Asa Newell, Liam McNeely, just a laundry list of kind of who's lately of
You may
first
have heard
round
of them.
picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, a time or two.
Yeah.
So he's going to have that ability to do that once again at BYU alongside a star talent like that and be able to make him better and then score the ball as well too. And if I have this correctly, like in his freshman season, like he set the Baylor record for freshman single assists at 148, then also in a single game of 13. So you have someone that's a playmaker, creates paint touches, it's driving kicks, it's drop offs. He plays pick and roll, can be able to play in the pocket, make the pocket pass, put zips on his pass for skips and on things of those and of that nature. It's the guy who's just all around advanced in the pick and roll, can score, pull up shooter. Although I think the pull up still does need some more consistency, especially from three. If you're going to be a league, you already have to have that pull up three out of pick and roll in your arsenal for sure. And then just around the rim, there's some crack there, some touch, there's some wiry strength that I do like there, and just fearlessness that he does have. And defensively, I do want to see just a more consistent engagement there. There are quick hands there. But at the end of the day, he's small at 6'1", so he's really gonna have to find ways to be a pest, have that motor revved up and that competitive nature at all times. But yeah, it's a lot to like. But at that 6'1" size, he does have a little bit of an uphill battle on the pro level, but the tools are certainly there and warrants interest.
Yeah, just like we were talking about with Ian Jackson, I'm gonna probably have the same issues with Robert Wright III. Like, what
Hmm.
separates you from being a very good college point guard to being an NBA level guard? You mentioned he's kind of small, has a good handle, can prod his way into the lane. So despite being a little bit smaller, a little bit slight of frame, found his way into the paint, has a good floater, can drive an attack with either hand, very shifty, good change of pace, has counters to his dribbles. I do think, though, that he suffers a lot of the small guy concerns in the paint, but
Yeah.
isn't afraid. I don't know if that's false confidence. I don't know if that's him being aware of his limitations, or if he's just more so interested in continuously applying pressure to the defense. Has some pull up to his game in terms of the mid range shot. Can get his shot up while being contested on his drive. So even though he's driving to the lane, and even though he's a little bit smaller, he does a good job of positioning his arms to be higher than the defense as he's getting into the lane, so he can get his shot up without necessarily being blocked. So he's really savvy when it comes to just ball placement as he's attacking and when he's attacking. Very smart and savvy in that nature. I do think that, not only he is small, but he is athletic. I think that he's got good core strength because he can come at you with some of these like double clutch finishes, stuff like that. I do think that he does have some indications to be a reliable shooter from deep, even though the
Hmm.
percentage didn't necessarily scream that at you. But the shot did take a little bit of time to get off. So I'm kind of curious to see at BYU Is he going to be able to take away some of that kind of all of that movement on his 3-point shot? You know, playing with Richie Saunders, hopefully Richie can kind of get this guy squared away in terms of his shooting. Has a solid first step, and then when you get into the passing, like this is the cream, you know, of his game, brother. Like this is the part of his draft stock that rises to the top because he great lob passer, great awareness on kickouts, has real zip on the ball, you know, can pass out of shots while in the air, great vision in the open court, finds his teammates on the moves. I think that he just does so many things as a playmaker well, Jim, but is this player archetype heavily desirable in the NBA still, or are we looking at best kind of like a bench guard, like a Trey Jones type of
Yeah.
and I feel like every kind of questionable shooter in college basketball that we like their vision and we like their savvy, we just kind of put them in the Jones Brothers bucket, you know, and hope that they can fit that role. But is that something that NBA teams are necessarily tripping over themselves to go and get?
Yeah, probably not. We just with the size concerns, and usually, like with that, you have to be maybe nuclear shooters too strong, but you have to be an elite level shooter.
Can't
With
be left
that,
alone.
exactly, you just absolutely can't, and you have to have that shot making aspect to you. You have the ball in your hands as well too. You know, talk about him shooting 35.2%, which is solid on 2.5 3-point attempts. Want to see that volume go up. On
Yep.
the positive side, with the shooting, 40% on catch and shoot threes. So that is certainly a positive. Just continue to be able to shoot the pull up threes and showing that consistency one more time as a catch and shoot threat, at least one more year. I think it's going to be a multiple year aspect after this. I
Sure.
do think he'll probably is going to be, honestly, just because of the height and just where the NBA is, he's probably going to be there all 4 years. That's my guess. You know, we'll kind of see how his game continues to progress. But yeah, you mentioned his ability to pass. One thing that I did like, and you need this, especially as a smaller guard, when he does get stuck in the paint, I do like he often does not panic. He does a good job of pivoting, being able to find different angles and then be able to get a pass out, whether spraying it back out or if it's a wraparound pass or kind of finding a small window in the lane. So I do like his ability to not panic, play off the 2 feet, and find an outlet there too. So he's going to continue to have to do those type of things when you play against the NBA trees, and then and just the consistency of that decision making when you're playing against that type of athleticism. I'm just hoping that he can take a step forward as a shooter and or a more disruptive playmaker, and I think that can certainly boost his stock. I don't think it'll alleviate the concerns of him being 6'1" and still kind of needing to add strength. But I do think it'll make more evaluators feel more comfortable about what the bench role and him potentially leading the second team looks like, or of a change of pace guard off the bench.
I think it'll have to because if you look at the defensive end, we don't got to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on this side of the floor, in
Yeah,
my opinion, Jam, because
yeah,
I think he's easily a one position defender. I think he stays in front of his man well, has solid recovery speed as well, but gets baited by pump fakes often. Decent at being able to be in consistent position to contest shots, but isn't necessarily long enough to bother the shots all that often. I think he tries to be pesky, but can get manipulated to be out of position. And even though he's not super skinny or anything like that, he's not going to give you a lot of versatility on the
yeah,
defensive end either. So I think that all that kind of baked into a cake. I think you're on point in my opinion, Jam, as a guy who might not be a this year guy. You might be wanting to see him play a lot of college basketball before you bring him in, but you know, Ryan Nimhard is a guy who might already be starting for the Dallas Mavericks, and he's not necessarily the biggest guy, but he's shown that he can be one of the best playmakers on your team and be a great organizer if your team is in need of one. So I think that's where we can probably leave off of Robert Wright III, Jam. We'll hit this next break, and we'll be back to talk about one of the most sought after junior college guys that came out this season playing at Auburn this year. We'll be right back to explain who that is. All right, Jam. Bruce Pearl may be out the door as the Auburn Tigers head coach, but incoming JUCO standout Elyjah Freeman is here to save the day. He is some combination of a guard wing forward. Maybe as he gets older, you might see him play that forward role more prominently. Listed as a sophomore, and has a lot of years of eligibility to stay in college basketball. 6'8", 185 pounds, will roughly be around 20 years old from what I saw on the line. Last year, Jam, playing at Lincoln, he scored almost 19 points per game, almost 9 rebounds, over 2 assists, almost 2 steals, almost 1 block, with shooting splits of 59, 46, 81. Jam, this is a JUCO standout. I have learned to try to value JUCO scouting a lot more the more that I have done this. And this is the reason why teams get excited when you
Yeah.
can get a young 6'8", 185-pound, kind of do it all combo position, multi-position guy. Jam, I didn't watch a whole heck of a lot of him last year. I'm not going to lie. But over the summer, I scouted his film and I was like, okay, I can see
I
why.
see it.
I can see why college teams might be kind of lining up trying to recruit Elyjah Freeman to their university, man. What did the film say to you?
Yeah, I mean, the first couple things that really jump out to me is just that athleticism at 6'8". He's an NBA athlete, and he comes from an athletic family, which is no surprise. His mom played volleyball and basketball at Florida Atlantic and Palm Beach State, and his dad played basketball at Palm Beach State as well too. So you have those athletic genes, and it shows up on both ends of the floor. And the sell, I think, is very simple, at least for me, for Freeman. He's a pass, dribble, shoot wing with explosive NBA athleticism and tools and the length, that positional size. So I think at the very least, you're looking and hoping for someone that can play a 3 and D role. He was someone that you mentioned shot 45.6% from three, but the volume was pretty low,
Yep.
1.8 3-point attempts per game. So that's something we do want to see take a jump, hopefully, maybe 3 next year, 4, whatever the case may be. But and looking a little more into that, he shot 43.9 on catch and shoot threes. So that's a huge positive, and 48.7 on unguarded catch and shoot threes on that's 39 attempts. So I do like the shooting, even if it does come down with more volume. I am trust what I'm seeing from the shooting, the confidence, the shot making ability there. And when you have someone like that, not only does he do that, he can attack closeouts, for playing off the spot ups. And there's some real juice with the ball in his hands. There is a creative handle. There's some stop start to his game, to be the ability to be able to change directions. I believe it was the last game against UNC Pembroke, probably one of his more notable highlights and moments of the season. He comes off the ball, he grabs it, then he tells him when to clear out, gets in isolation. He hits the defender with, tween, then it's a snatch back. Then he just completely shakes him and finishes
Yep.
with a vicious two-hand dunk. So he has that type of ball skills with that athleticism and the projectable shooting. And on the defensive end, at the very least, is a playmaker. He plays defensive passing lanes pretty well, good instincts, quick hands, knows how to use length on and off the ball, and 2.4 stocks per game. So I do like the foundation for what he can be, and he's going to get a chance to go to Auburn, as you mentioned, multiple years there. I'm curious to see how much he gets to play with the ball in his hands, but I think it's a great chance for him to jump up to not just, the Power Five, but to the SEC, which has been the best conference in college basketball for the past 3 years, maybe more. But him getting a chance to go up and test himself and develop against every day, just the NBA caliber athleticism, the length, the strength, and just seeing what that jump is there. Because obviously, it's a different game on a day-to-day basis on the D2 level. Did you like what you saw from Freeman as you got into your film dive?
Yeah, first of all, Jim, fantastic breakdown, dude. Very
I
in
appreciate
depth,
that. Too
wide
kind, bro.
ranging. You even gave a little bit of biography to it, the DNA aspect, that component to his game, dude. Fantastic job, Jam. You are the man for the job
Appreciate
here.
you.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so to Elijah being in the SEC, even if you disagree that the SEC might not be the best, or most prestigious basketball conference in America, you'd have a hard time finding a more athletic conference, right? And I think that
Yep.
that's where Elijah playing in the SEC is going to be interesting because he's going to get his athleticism, which includes strength, tested on a nightly basis. And I think that's going to be important for his development because even though he's 6'8", listed at 185 pounds with Auburn. So if you're considering that teams typically are a little bit more favorable in their listings, like, is he even really that? So that's going to be kind of something that I'm going to be looking at. But I think too, man, like attacks off the bounce, effortless leaper, the type of player that I like to describe as having helium legs. Like it's harder for him
Mm.
to stay on the floor than it is for him to jump in the air. Can finish with his left and right hand. So you have ambidexterity on top of that effortless leaping, pressures the rim, initiates and draws contact, good hands on the catch. And I don't know how often I say for like a perimeter player that they have good hands, but if you look at like the types of plays that he had with Lincoln last year with the rail splitters, I thought that he was fantastic at like getting the ball in high leverage situations. He's kind of like a wide receiver. Speaking of SEC, he looks a lot like these crazy SEC receiving athletes that you got to look out for on a nightly basis. But I thought that, great body control on top of the freaky athleticism and nasty, slams. He's got good touch on his floaters and, layups and a good amount of craft. And sometimes with these athletic type of wings, they're more heavily noted for their crazy feats of athleticism. But what gives me hope with Elijah is that he has a good level of feel, finesse, and craft to go along with
Yep.
the crazy bounce and leaping ability that he has. I think even though while he was thin, at least in JUCO, he did a good job of body shielding to protecting the ball on his way in pursuit of the basket, right? And he scrapped for the ball too, man. Like fought, like dove on the ground, went after rebounds, went after his own rebounds. Not one of these guys who was like kind of too cool for everybody else on the team. He was one of these guys who like led the way in terms of production, but also with the effort and energy that he played with. And I think those are the type of guys that Bruce Pearl historically has gone after, right? So if you're worried about the heart of a player, like Bruce Pearl is just not going to go after a guy who doesn't play with like the heart of a lion, right? So I think all of that is great, but there are some concerns, right? There's a reason why, this wasn't like the number one prospect on recruiting boards or anything like that, right? The shot base is pretty skinny. The volume was pretty low. He's not always on the same page as his teammates when passing, even though he got like over 2 assists per game. I do get a little bit worried that the handle is a little bit wide and too far out. I thought that he
Yeah.
could get a little bit sloppy with his gathers on drives to the basket to where the ball get poked out. And again, just as a playmaker, I didn't see anything that made me feel like he's like a natural passer. I think this is going to be something that he kind of has to work on. But again, with Auburn, playing with Tahad Pettiford, you're playing with a lot
Mhm.
of guys who have experience having the ball in their hand. That may not necessarily be asked of him right off the jump, Jam. What are kind of some of the concerns that you have with his game? Because right now we're talking about this guy like he's the second coming of a mentality.
Yeah, it's definitely some of the decision making and to handle those type of things where he is the primary guy and just seeing some of that I wonder how much is just like, all right, I'm clearly the most athletic person on the floor pretty much every night on the D2 level. So I'm gonna try to maybe over dribble or really penetrate this gap, see if I can squeeze in and do certain things. I found he made more turnovers doing that as opposed to really being too sloppy with the passing. Like you said, he did miscommunicate a lot with teammates with kind of the passes and the reads, but I don't think he was like throwing the ball in the stands and those type of things. So what he can do on the ball and kind of that development is what I really want to see. And as you mentioned already with like Pettiford and like, Keyshawn Hall, who fancies himself as a
Yep.
big guard and like a big handler too. So I'm curious to see how he fits in that kind of pecking order of being able to handle the ball and make plays. More like he's going to be in the secondary guy, but I think to start the season, they'll probably ease him in off the ball, get up and down in transition, go be athletic, space the floor, and work second side stuff. And then I couldn't see as he gets comfortable, maybe they do run some more plays specifically for him to be run pick and rolls and to be able to kind of be free and do his thing. So I do want to see what that on ball stuff looks like and that decision making to see is like, all right, is there be more of a secondary type of guy on NBA level, or it's going to be just more of a role player, which is completely fine, obviously. It's kind of just seeing what that level of his upside could potentially be.
I think that that's astute observations all the way around there, Jam. And I think too, if we flip it to the defensive end quickly, I think that he gives a lot of effort on that end. I talked about like the hustle that he gives, like getting after loose balls. I think that he
Hmm.
gives a lot of effort on screens, can bother shots with his length and his size. Um, but he can get caught ball watching. I think he's a bit too hands down on the perimeter, slipped under screens a lot. I don't think that he necessarily wants contact on the defensive end, which means that he needs to get a little bit stronger. And even though he's explosive on the offensive end, I didn't feel that same level of athleticism on the defensive end to be like a major
Yeah.
disruptor. So those are going to be the things that I think that he has to shore up with that. I don't know if that means that he's even going to start for Auburn because you're typically, if you're going to play for a Pearl program, you got to be sound defensively. And that might be, because of the game is probably going to get sped up a lot for him. I don't know if he's going to be ready to take on SEC level starters, on night one for himself. He might work his way into being a starter
Yeah.
or even playing starters minutes coming off of the bench. But I do worry about him being fundamentally sound on a defensive end, Jam.
Yeah, those things he's certainly going to have to, it's just like clean up, just being more fundamentally sound and leverage his athleticism more consistently on that end. I thought he did a solid job, but as you mentioned, it did leave a bit more to be desired when you think about just kind of how freaky he can be on offensively with his athleticism.
For sure. All right, so Jam, let's transition now to the last guy. I was a little bit selfish here and snuck this guy in. You were kind enough to entertain having a conversation around him, and sometimes I just need to check my feelings a little bit at the door whenever I'm talking about a player. This guy transferring to St. Louis, guard, junior, 6'5" as a guard, so good size, 180 pounds. Will be 22 if he does get drafted after this season. Quentin Jones, formerly out of Northern Illinois with the Huskies. Last year, he averaged almost 17 points per game, Jam, almost 5 boards, 3.5 assists, almost 1 whole block per game, 1.3 steals with shooting splits of 46, 36, and 77. Jam, do you want me just to get all emotional and romantic here first, or do you want to kind of uh, have a more, I guess, a realistic approach right off the jump with yourself?
Oh no, go ahead. Let's get emotional. Let's get into the feelings. I'm all for
Yeah, we're on the last prospect here, so why not?
it.
Speaking of being emotional and romantic, I love Quentin Jones, Jam. Like, he was one of these guys that, as I'm watching last year, like in the vein of Max Green, those who I've talked to, like I grew with an affinity for Brandon Macklin out of Radford last year. So there are just these weird prospects that are just kind of unheralded sleepers that I just love, and I'm just like, why aren't enough people kind of talking about him? Shout out Jeremy Elyjah. He's kind of in that same camp.
Yeah.
With Quentin Jones, Jam, I'm looking at a guy who is very quick, has good size as a lead guard, shot pretty good from deep on the volume that he shot. Like I said, 36% from deep. I thought that he had awesome dribble cadence. I thought that he did a good job of drawing contact. I thought that he wasn't afraid to mix it up in the paint. Good floor spacer with a solid handle, gets to his shot off of the step back as well. Made good cuts off the ball too. Wasn't just like one of these guys who stood still and waited for the ball to find his hand so he can chuck up a shot. I thought he did a good job of getting to his mid-range. Would like to have saw it a little bit more, but when he got there, it looked fine. He does want to drive right at a higher rate than left, but is capable of driving to the left too. Typical college guard, looks good in transition. I feel like almost every starting guard in NCAA looks good when they're in transition jam. But I loved the scoring package. And then as a passer, I thought that he could be a little bit reckless, but overall I like the gusto that he had as a facilitator. I thought that he made some daring reads and connected on a high volume of them. I just think that with better talent around him, he's like one of these guys that could look even better. He reminds me a little bit of Keshawn Gilbert whenever he, went to Iowa State. He was a guy that I was a real big fan of too. He kind of gives me a lot of Keshawn Gilbert type vibes, and he wasn't necessarily drafted in the NBA, but he's gonna get looks in professional leagues for a long time. So that's kind of where I am with Quentin Jones, man. I'm a big fan of his overall game. I just think that defensively, he's a guy that produced forced defensive events at a pretty high clip. Was a guy that you couldn't approach him like he's just going to give you a path to the basket, or was a guy that you can make lazy passes or shots around, because he's going to get a hand on that thing on that end of the floor too.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. And with his defense, 2.2 stocks per game, like he is thin, which I'm concerned about on both ends of the floor, but he is long and he is wiry and he, does quick hands and he will be active defensively. So I do like that about him. And you don't always get that from someone, especially, that's transferring up. He was at Illinois, and then he was third in the MAC in scoring as well, too, to kind of have that two-way approach, and he goes to St. Louis. I am excited just about that dribble pass shoot skill set that he has. Can play pick and roll. As you mentioned, he can be a little bit reckless.
Yep.
But, I like the ability to try things. I'm not sure how much he'll be able to do it in St. Louis, but with the Vila, I mean, he has freedom to kind of try some things. Yeah, so that could be fun. Maybe he'll get some freedom as well, too. So
That's
I'm
like
looking
mid-major Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray right there.
I would love to see that two-man game.
That would be fun.
That should be the film that they're watching for sure. That would be a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm just interested to see how he continues to work with the guys, as you mentioned, more talent at St. Louis. I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts. Do you see him as just like a more of a pure lead guard? Is there any type of wing stuff to him, or like can he defend some threes, or is it just twos, or you feel confident defending at the point of attack?
I kind of like him as a combo. I mean, again,
Okay.
if he adds strength, he played at Cal Poly, he played at Northern Illinois, and now St. Louis isn't necessarily like a world beater of a D1 program either. So
Mhm.
we haven't even seen him, with crazy amounts of resources, I would say.
Yeah.
So you don't know what he could look like if he does well at St. Louis and then transfers up. I think this is a long play. I do think that he could play the 1 and the 2, and I think he could defend the 1 and the 2. Now, if he gets a little bit stronger, you might even get him in some versatility to be able to defend out to the 3. I just love the fact that he can play either guard spot and can
Mhm.
defend either guard spot. I think that gives you a lot of utility. Prove that he could be a reliable 3-point shooter on tough looks too, man. Like
Yeah.
self-create, off of movement shots, and I'm really excited to see. I think the decision to play with the Vila is low key like very impressive, because you're not going to go to very many schools to show that you can play off of big men who are comfortable having the offense flow through them. And I'm not sitting here proclaiming that Avila is going to be an NBA level talent, but you could like mimic NBA schemes with a guy like Avila who can make plays out of the mid post, high post, low block all those different types of areas, run DHOs with them. You could easily do that and give NBA teams a little bit easier of a time assessing how you could translate into their scheme.
Yeah, no doubt. And with St. Louis being in the A10 and me being in the A10 territory, A10 country, I'm looking forward to it. Looks like it's going to line up for me, be able to see St. Louis when they visit my area. So I'm excited to see Quentin Jones potentially in person.
You gotta let me know, man. And I'm not
Oh,
the only
for
one.
sure.
I forget what outlet or who it was I saw on X, but somebody dropped Quentin Jones within their like 60 round mock draft. And I was like, the
I
movement
love
is
it.
starting. I saw that he was
Yeah.
already on there. So and Ryan Hammer, who has been like on this other Blue Blooded podcast, he did a really he's been doing this really cool thing about like just traveling around the country, like talking to coaches and programs and stuff like that. It's been so much fun to watch. But I asked him about him, and he said that Quentin's an interesting dude that he has his eye on as well. So I'm not crazy because other people like him too. I liked him a lot last year, and I'm excited to see what he looks like moving forward. But Jam, that's gonna wrap it up. We did a good job today, man, talking about 6 players. We moved up our prospect count to 44. We're drawing closer and closer to the start of the season, and we're trying to give the people as many players to add to their big boards as possible. As we close the show, just want to let people know that on the Locked On NBA podcast show with No Ceilings on Monday, the Tylers will have a Duke and Arizona scrimmage recap. On Tuesday, Nathan and Maxwell will discuss the top NBA juniors, which includes Victor Wembanyama, Amin Thompson, so on and so forth. On Wednesday, Albert and Corey will have a Jaden Quayton scout. Thursday, the Tylers have a show that is yet to be determined, but stay tuned because it's probably going to be a banger. And then Friday, Albert and Corey will have an Isaiah Harwell scout, a player that we have already discussed. And then on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed, the Tylers will preview the Big East, which has a lot of fun talent to kind of dive in. Jam, what do you kind of have going on behind the scenes for No Ceilings, brother?
Yeah, behind the scenes, I'm putting together the rest of my piece on the Caden Lewis. So hopefully I'll be finished with that this week and we'll be ready to go next week. So that's it. And I know we are working something on as a team in the background. So I'm getting prepared for that as well. So I know we're all very excited about that.
Yeah, we are drawing closer and closer to projects dropping for No Ceilings, and just follow No Ceilings NBA anywhere that you have social media just for the drops that we're going to be sharing soon. That way you are caught up to speed. Go to noceilingsnba.com. Follow us there. Follow us on our YouTube. You never know where we're going to drop the big news as to what we're doing, but it's coming soon. As for myself, I'm writing a piece on off-season findings that I have so far. And that's been a really fun piece because I want to give out like 5 things that I'm noticing about this upcoming draft cycle that I just want to make sure that the people, Jam, I want to make sure that they know what we're kind of getting ourselves into with this upcoming class, some tendencies, some trends that I've noticed. It's going to be a fun piece. But as far as our podcast go, Jam, next Sunday, same bat time, same bat channel, we're going to have the second part of the favorite portal fits piece. Do we want to share some names or no? Maybe 1, 2. How do you want to do?
Yeah, we definitely can share a name or two.
All right, what name do you want to share? I'll let you pick one.
Honestly, I don't remember what names we got for next week. I'll be honest.
Okay,
I gotta
yeah.
check this sheet because we talked about so many names. It's gonna be like,
Yeah,
oh
for
yeah.
sure. For sure. Yeah. I do a really bad job of hitting Jam up with like, hey, here's 14 news that we can talk about over the next 2 weeks. And Jam's like, yeah, sure. That sounds fun. I hit him up with a lot, but Henry V-Star is the name that
How
will
can
be
I think
talking.
that was a guy I suggested too. I'm sorry, Henry, my fault.
It's okay. It's all right. We'll drop Henry V-Sar is a name that we will be talking about next week. And there's there's 6 more names. And if I must say, I think that it's going to be a probably more anticipated list of names than what we talked about this time. That's what we do when we have 2 parters. We got to get you with that second one. But that's going to do it for us here on the show. You follow Jam on X at Jam on the Boards. You can follow myself at Stephen G Hoops. Again, follow NoCeilingsNBA.com, No Ceilings NBA, anywhere that you get your social media fix from, on your podcast, No Ceilings NBA. Follow us on Field of 68, the show that we're doing with them. which is called The Ground Floor, a collaboration with No Ceilings. Follow us on Locked On, the Locked On NBA Draft with No Ceilings. And just follow No Ceilings NBA anywhere that you get your podcasts as well. We got a lot of places where we can be found. We're doing it big this year. But for my co-host Jam, for myself, for the rest of us here at No Ceilings, we will catch up with y'all next time. Much love, y'all.